Hari Om. We are now in chapter 5. As you know, chapter 5 is called the Yoga of True Renunciation. Now, what is exactly meant by renunciation? If you look up the dictionary, to renounce is to give up your existing status quo and adopt a new situation. So giving up what you have right now, your family, your job and your lifestyle, and running to the Himalayas is not renunciation. Sannyas is not renunciation. Sannyas is renunciation of ego, not giving up something external. To bring about a revolutionary change within oneself is renunciation. When you talk about revolutionary change, we are currently acting on and identifying with our ego, which is propelled by our vasanas. To give up this identification and to give up this control of our ego is renunciation. And that is a revolutionary change within ourselves. Now, changes on the outside, which might be revolutionary, are not actual changes. Look at the Russian Revolution. They brought about a radical change in the lifestyle of the people. But it lasted just a mere 55 years. Now, 55 years is a wink in the history of mankind. Look at Hitler and Mao. They also tried to bring about revolutionary changes on the outside. They did put out effort and time to make those changes, but no benefit or any productive outcome came out of that. Contrast that with the revolutionary change that made the carpenter's son, Jesus Christ, or the Prince Siddhartha or Kapilavastu, who became the Prince of Compassion, Lord Buddha, or I might add, an ordinary journalist, Balakrishna Menon, who transformed into Pujya Swami Chinmayanandaji Maharaj. Now, these revolutionary changes within these masters not only made them peaceful, happy and content, but it also translated into the same, meaning peace and harmony and happiness for millions of people all over the world for generations. That's the revolutionary change. That's the renunciation we are talking about. Now, so the Lord's advice is to give up your ego and give up the idea that you are the BMI. As I mentioned earlier, we are at this stage identified with our body, mind and intellect. We think we are the body, mind and intellect. And with that identification, all our problems that we face come with it. If only we can give up that idea, and that's the advice that Lord Krishna says, which is a revolutionary idea. Give up this idea that you are this body, mind and intellect. And there have been so many rational explanations that have been given to prove that we are not the body, mind and intellect. As you know, this identification with the body, mind and intellect acts as a shackle on ourselves, which limits our potential. We are not able to accomplish and live up to our maximum potential because of this identification with the body, mind and intellect. In inspired moments where the ego is not there, for example, in an artist like a painter or a musician, in inspired moments they are able to outshine and outperform their normal capabilities. Even in public speaking, there are people who can hardly get a few words across to others ordinarily. But when they are inspired, they become so eloquent and they are able to convey their ideas in a very systematic way because the ego is not functioning there. And when one functions without these shackles of the ego, there are no consequences to your behavior. Our Gurudev gives the example that while you are sleeping in the night, you are fast asleep, but you elbow your wife and you hit her so hard that she wakes up and she is so angry that you hit her so hard, but when she looks at your innocent face so peacefully sleeping, there is no consequence. She is not angry anymore because she realizes that you have acted without your ego. In the same way, when, let's say, your friend is drunk and is acting in a silly manner in public, and you go and convince him to get into your car and you want to take him home, but he fights you. Not only does he fight you, he gives you a good punch on the face and says, "No, I'm not coming home." But you say, okay, that's all right. Now he has hit you real hard. It is not just a gentle punch. He has given you with full force, and yet you are not angry with him. Why? Because you know that he is not doing that with his ego. His ego is not there. In a drunken state, he has acted that way. So those are examples where it shows that when you function without your ego, there are no consequences. When one acts with selfish desires, he may acquire wealth and fame, but there is no peace. Now we have seen, and we ourselves do this, when we act with selfish desires, we may succeed in acquiring wealth and be very famous and rich and live a luxurious life. But Vedanta asserts that there is no peace of mind in that kind of a person. Why? Because there are new desires that come in the mind of that person constantly. Plus, there are worries about how to preserve and maintain what you have already acquired. And that keeps the mind being restless, and a restless mind is an unhappy mind. There is no peace or happiness there. Therefore, act with no desire for fruits of action. So when you act with no desire for the fruits of action, meaning you are doing the same thing that you are doing, but with a little adjustment in your attitude and in your behavior, that you are not overly concerned about the results of your actions, so that you can reap the fruits of your actions. Now, because you don't have that anxiety, your performance naturally is going to be excellent, and people would be benefited by what you are doing, and the reward will automatically come to you anyhow. So why worry about that? By being worried about the fruits of your actions, you only dull your mind and dissipate your vital energy so that you are not able to perform in the present. You will be rewarded and others will benefit as well. Example given is the sun. The sun shines and gives out heat and light. Now, we all learned in school that the cause of rain is because of the sun. Why? Because the sun's heat evaporates the water in the ocean and the river, and the evaporated water goes up, and as it goes up, the air gets colder and colder, and this evaporated steam condenses into water, and that's what comes down as rain. So in effect, we are saying it is because of the sun that we get the rain. Now, from the sun's point of view, it is not trying to cause rain. It is not as if the sun is very busy all day long trying to evaporate the water so that it can, the steam can go up and accumulate as clouds and then later come down as rain. The sun just remains as it is. It is its nature to give out heat and light. In the same way, in the presence of a Brahman, life goes on. He does not do anything. It is our vasanas that are doing what we are doing right now. The Lord is in us. If not for His presence, we would not be able to act. But He is not the one who is acting. In His presence, our vasanas act out our lives. True sannyasi has no raga or dvesha and has no expectations of the future. Raga and dvesha are likes and dislikes. What are likes and dislikes? These are the manifestation of our vasanas. Any situation that is conducive to my vasana, I like. Any situation that is contrary to my vasana, I dislike. So, when you say that a true sannyasi is one who has no raga or dvesha, it means that he has transcended his vasanas. He is not controlled by his vasanas anymore. So therefore, we are advised to try to exhaust our vasanas as much as possible so that we don't come under the sway of these extreme likes and dislikes. Likes and dislikes are due to vasanas, conducive and unconducive. He is free of the pairs of opposites. Now, what are these pairs of opposites? Heat and cold, joy and sorrow, success and failure. These are the pairs of opposites that we go through in our lives all the time. And why are we going through all that? Because these are all functions of the ego. And as long as the body, mind and intellect are functioning and we are identified with those body, mind and intellect, we would have these pairs of opposites influencing our lives all the time. These are functions of the body, mind and intellect. He has transcended all of them. That is the one who has realized his true self. Both Sankhya and Karma paths lead to the same goal. He who is truly established in either one of them comes to obtain the fruits of both. Now we started off with the chapter 5 by saying that there are these two main paths, the Sankhya path or the Jnana Yoga and the Karma Yoga. And Arjuna's question was, which one of them is nobler? Lord Krishna said, both are equally good and they both lead to the same goal. Here Lord Krishna says, both the Sankhya and Karma paths lead to the same goal. And he who indulges and is truly established in either one of these paths, either the Sankhyan path or the Karma Yoga path. He who is established in either one of those will come to benefit from the fruits of both. And that's, if you really look at it, when these two paths lead to your ultimate peace and tranquility in your mind, which is the ideal state of mind for true and intense meditation, that is the fruit of all the benefits of these two paths. And you come to benefit from that by pursuing and truly established in either one of these paths. Now, any ordinary act can be converted into a divine act of worship and dedication by two methods. We act all the time. Every action of ours can be converted into a divine act of worship and dedication by one of two methods. One, by eliminating the sense, by renouncing the concept of agency, meaning by eliminating that concept that I am doing it. While you are doing this action, try to eliminate that concept that I am doing it. Because that sense of agency will only enhance your ego, and thereby your action would be a selfish one. Whereas if you eliminate that sense of agency, your act will become an act of worship and dedication towards the others. The second method would be to consistently refuse to get involved in the fruits of actions. That's the second method. When you act, you consistently refuse to get involved in the fruits of your actions. Now, the first method, the renunciation of the concept of agency, is the Sankhyan method, while the second method, meaning to act without expectations of fruits of actions, is the Karma Yoga method. Renunciation cannot be achieved without the yoga of action. So, if one is frustrated in their efforts to get whatever they want, and when they don't get what they want, that is not renunciation when you get frustrated and you give up. Renunciation is after you put out your action. Renunciation cannot be achieved without the yoga of action. To renounce action, one needs to act, and with that you can renounce it later. So one must act first. Without having it, you cannot renounce it. When, as an example, when you want to polish a silver vessel, and you take some silver polish and put on it, it will make it even duller than what it was when you put the polish. But if you take a cloth and keep rubbing it, not only the rubbing process will remove the polish, but it will also remove the scum that was covering the silver vessel and making it dull, and bring out the shine once you keep on rubbing it. In the same way, the dull mind needs to be activated by action. And when you indulge in action, it would seem as if you are being very selfish. But then, after acting, you renounce those actions in your mind. While you are acting, you renounce the fruits of actions and the sense of agency. And thereby, your mind becomes purified. Now, extrovertedness is what sullies the mind of its godliness. Our mind is dull mainly because, Vedanta says, mainly because of our extrovertedness, meaning we are constantly focused on the outside. Try to be introverted in between, not all the time, but in specific periods of time during our prayer or during our meditation. Get introverted and focus on your within, and that would make your mind sharper and brighter. In performing karma yoga, actions are done without selfish desires. When somebody is acting without selfish desires and without desire for the fruits of actions, their mind and intellect, which is ordinarily in our actions, are very agitated during actions. Why? Because it is always interested in the fruits of actions. And because of that, the mind is in a state of restlessness all the time. But when somebody acts without selfish desires and without that expectation of any fruits of actions, their mind becomes calmer. When their mind is calmer, their actions not only not leave any new vasanas, but the existing vasanas get exhausted. Now when there is less pressure of these vasanas on the mind and intellect, which is normally how we are, the vasanas manifest itself by desires in our intellectual level, and the desires in the intellectual level translates into agitations in your mind. Now when the vasanas are less because of our selfless actions and less expectations of fruits of actions, the vasanas get exhausted. Therefore the pressure of the vasanas on the mind and intellect gets less, and the lesser the pressure on the vasanas, the mind becomes even calmer and more purified, and that is the snowballing effect that we are talking about, that would ultimately lead to a peaceful mind and eternal happiness. For one who has gained inner peace at the mental and intellectual levels, it is easy for him to restrain himself or deny himself of unending self-pleasures. It is our common experience that even though we want to live a spiritual life, there are unending desires within ourselves, and we may be able to control some of them sometimes, but invariably we give in to these desires. But Lord Krishna says, for one who has gained inner peace at the mental and intellectual level, when you gain this inner peace at the mental and intellectual level by desireless activity and not expecting fruits of actions, your mind and intellect becomes peaceful. In that state of mind, your ability to resist temptations and to restrain yourself from giving in to temptations is greatly enhanced. Now, it is easy. Renunciation and reveling in God consciousness is for a few only. As you know, living in God consciousness and reveling and renouncing all the worldly pleasures is possible only for a few realized souls. But for an average person like you and me, who not only want to study the ideas in the Gita, but also want to live these ideas in our daily life, how do we do it from a practical standpoint? Lord Krishna gives us the advice. he says, by resigning to Brahman, meaning total detachment. Understand, Lord Krishna himself says, please understand that total detachment is impossible for the human mind. One cannot be totally detached. Why? Because that is the nature of the human mind. It always wants to attach itself to something. So Lord Krishna says, detach from the unreal and attach to the real. We are attached to things and beings that we love. We know that when you love somebody or when you love something, our thoughts are frequently of that person or that thing. It could be your spouse, it could be your child, it could be one of your relatives that you are attached to. And when you love that person dearly, your thoughts are frequently about that person, even though you might be involved in your daily activities. In the same way, you could be attached to your wealth or your status and position. And if that is so, whatever you do, your mind and your thoughts are frequently about that, and you are consciously aware of that, and therefore you act according to preserving that. So wherever your love and attachment are, that's where your mind and thoughts are. The Lord says, transfer that attachment to what is real, because what we are attaching ourselves to are very unreal things. All these things, human beings and things in this world, are unstable and uncertain. Whereas if we attach ourselves to the real, meaning to the Lord, to Brahman, there is no possibility of ever coming to any disappointment or destruction. We are attached to things and beings we love. Our thoughts frequently go to our beloved. As a result, we fear for their safety. Now, this is a function of the ego. It is selfish and binding. Attachment to things and beings is a selfish thing. You need to know the difference between love and attachment. Love is something that gives. Attachment is something that wants. So when you are attached to someone, it is a selfish feeling that you want that person for yourself, and therefore you are worried about the safety of that person, or that thing, or that wealth, or that property, whatever it may be. So therefore, understand and don't confuse between love and attachment. Attachment needs to be gotten rid of, because that's what causes the problems in us. Remove that attachment from the things and being and attach yourself to what is real, is the advice given in the scriptures. Love is always reciprocated. It is our common experience that when you love someone, the other person automatically loves you, even though he may be your enemy. But if you truly love your enemy and try to do good things for that person, it is only a matter of time before that enemy starts loving you and becomes your friend. It is common experience that anything that you love always is reciprocated. In the same way, when you love Brahman, Brahman will give you back in a reciprocal manner multiple times the amount of love that you give him. In fact, the Lord's love for us is there all the time. It is just that we are not tuned to receive his love. Just like a radio. If you have a radio and you want to tune into some channel, unless you tune the radio to that particular channel, you won't be able to receive the air waves that are there. Those waves are there already, but we are not able to receive it on the radio because it is not tuned to that particular station. In the same way, Lord's love to us is always there, but we are not tuned into that. You tune to that by loving the Lord, and He would reciprocate by 1,000 times or even more. Surrender all your attachment to Brahman and strive on. That's the advice given to you. Surrender all your attachments to Brahman. Whatever we are attached to, surrender them to the Lord and act on. Imagine yourself as the observer. This is a thought that is given. Imagine yourself as the observer, not only of what is happening outside. Assume that I am the observer. I am observing whatever that is happening outside in this world. Imagine that you are not only observing the outside events, but also what is happening in your body, mind and intellect. The one that is observing all this, not only the outside events, but whatever that is happening in the body, mind and intellect, is the observer. And that is me. That observer is me. But the enlivening factor of that observer, which is in the core of my personality, is the Atman, the self, which is my true self. So it is not only the observer, but in actual fact, it is the Atman, the self, that is the true being. So that is the example given. Imagine yourself as the observer, observing not only the happenings on the outside, but also everything that is happening in your body, mind and intellect. This detached observer is you, but the enlivening factor of this observer in your bosom is your spiritual center, your true self, the Atman. When this realization comes to you, when the realization comes that I am nothing but that Atman, when you view the world from that perspective, you can see nothing but Brahman everywhere. And that is the promise that is given by the Lord. We'll continue with that next time.
Thank you.